Hello and welcome to 1000 Actually Fun Books. We're reviewing books on a quest to find some that are actually fun, the best of the best books that people who want enjoyment escapism books can enjoy. All right, our book today is Live Free or Die by John Ringo. It's a science fiction book. It's the first currently it's a trilogy, although I've been told that there's a fourth one eventually, like it's being written right now, which means it may be out sometime in the next decade. But, so this is it's not super heavy of a science fiction book. It's relatively, I guess, in terms of science fiction, kind of soft, but got aliens and stuff. All right, so let me tell you the plot. It starts out with a alien race comes, just pops into the solar system, builds a gate, and basically tells Earth, hey, Earthlings, you now have a gate. Anybody in the universe can use this gate. You cannot block this gate. Goodbye. And they're like, humans are like, what? We're barely having space travel. So this does take place. This was written in 2010, and it takes place pretty much 2010-ish. They say later on in the book, after several years have passed, that it's been 30 years since the two towers collapsed 9/11. So it takes place somewhere between 2010 and 2030. So that gives you a time frame. So it doesn't start out with huge technological advancements. You know, we've got an international space station and, a couple visits to the moon under our belt, and that's about it. So Earthlings are not ready for, interstellar anything. Anyway, the first people to come through the gate are just alien traders. They come to Earth and hey, got anything to trade? And Earth offers up basically everything. And the traders are like, nah, you got nothing. You got the greatest works of art are, like folk art and, your middle content. I will trade you for some of your gold and your platinum and stuff, but really, it's not worth it. We'll give you some junk for that. Of course, their junk is way better than anything we got. So we're like, yes, we'll give you tons of gold for that junk that's so much better than what we've got. So anyway, that was the first contact, not very bad. But then the second contact comes, and the second contact is a different alien species. They come through without saying anything. They nuke 3 world cities, like Mexico City and Cairo and Shanghai, and basically tell Earthlings, so we are going to be your protectors now. Give us all your gold and platinum and other heavy metals that are valuable and rare. Now, give it to us all. And Earth is like, yes, okay. So we kind of start the story with that circumstance. So we have some traders who come and are ignored by our protectors, and the protectors who are sitting there hovering in Earth's orbit under threat, and they can monitor all cell phones, computers, everything. And so Earth is like, oh yes, our gracious protectors. Hey, hey, hey. So the traders are more powerful than the antagonistic aliens. They've got a bigger fleet. The antagonistic aliens will not mess with the traders. But the trader aliens have no interest in protecting Earth. They're like, well, you're just like this backwater nothing. Why should we expend any of our ships or money or anything to protect you guys? We don't care about you. So at the beginning, our main character, Tyler, kind of happens across some of the traders while they happen to be on Earth. And they're like, since you're here for a day, why don't I just round up a bunch of random things and see if any of it appeals to you? So he goes to one of his jobs. He's taken trash basically from a store, soup cans that, were dented that nobody's wanted, whatever, things like that, and comes to the trader and says, try a little bit of everything. And so they try and try, but that's poisonous, and that's not interesting, and that's poisonous, and what is this? And so it discovered very early on in the book, so this is not a big spoiler or anything, maple syrup. Pure original maple syrup they're like, ooh, We like it. We want it. Basically, it acts like alcohol, we'll say. And they love it. They're like, give it to me at all. And so this, nobody is like, yeah, that's dragon tears. Yeah, I'll get right on getting you this very rare, very valuable substance. Yes, absolutely. Give me some stuff to trade for that. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Here's some of our junk tech that he's like, I'm suddenly extremely wealthy. So this now suddenly extremely wealthy with alien tech guy is like, okay, they like maple syrup. This is a tradable commodity. And then, and I'll get back to this. So he becomes very wealthy, and he knows humanity is doomed unless they can persuade these traders that we've got something you want to protect. So the traders, so eventually, we'll just skip all the details. Eventually, the traders basically come back and say, yes, to the other aliens, this little section of Earth that can grow the maple trees, that are currently growing and producing and distilling maple syrup, you may not touch. Everything else is fair game, though. So it protected a tiny little bit of Earth. And he's like, well, that's not going to be good enough. But he got a trading partner. Now they have something to trade. So the trading group will actually trade them increasingly valuable stuff. And then once he has the currency, he can trade for other stuff that's more valuable. So his goal is eventually to protect Earth, or to make Earth, our own planet, not belonging to aliens, that we can defend. We can self-defend our little solar system in the vast galaxy of multiple alien species. And that is sort of the premise of the book, that we have got an alien who's not afraid to nuke cities from orbit, just casually does so, and a lot of cities die in this book. But we've got a handful of small group of humans, the underdogs trying to come out from under a huge deficit of technology to try and get out from under the thumb of these other aliens and protect and hold the Earth if they can. Okay, so that's the plot in a nutshell. So some things that are unique that I liked about this book. First is the Earth does not unite. Aliens come on the scene and they stay separate. We're all separate countries. America and Russia still squabble, and China's doing its own thing, and sure, everybody hates the aliens, but we don't become one planet unified. And that seems very realistic for humans, really. We might unite together for a single cause for certain things. And yes, I think in the case of mass extinction, there would be definitely some cooperation, but people still want their little, slice of the pie. I am king of this hill and no one shall take it from me kind of attitude. That's just the way humanity is. So I thought that was a unique thing amongst sci-fi books, that usually Earth becomes united when we are faced with an external threat. And this one didn't do that. And it does only plays a small part in this book, but I just still think that's interesting. Another thing that's interesting that I liked about it is the science in the book. So the sci-fi science. And yes, there's plenty of things that are way far in the future, maybe impossible, level of shields and AIs and gravitational manipulation, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a level of realism in a lot of what Earth is trying to do. There's a lot of, okay, we need to melt an asteroid to get the raw materials. Okay, it doesn't say, and we'll build this, technological marvel with blah, 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 blah. Instead, they're like, let's build a giant mirror and shine enough sunlight in one spot and we'll melt it. And then we can get the material out. I mean, that's a science that you could understand and relate to. It's not all, totally out there stuff. So I kind of like that. Something else is, so I like the fact that there's the aliens themselves, okay? That the big, mega, powerful aliens, the traders, aren't hostile. They're not necessarily helpful either, but they're not hostile. But they are, we'll say, fading in power. And so it's a time of instability in the galaxy because the major player that has been holding everything stable is basically falling apart. It's been in power for like 30,000 years, and now it's in the twilight of its empire. And so you can see that it's an interesting play of different. It's not all about war, although that's definitely looming, and that's a big problem with Earth right now. But I liked that the way they have that whole galaxy structure set up, the politics of that. Okay, something else. I really liked that initial idea of the maple syrup. That's another thing that I really liked about this, because it has a lot of factors that if the author had picked a different thing, like let's say you just picked, I don't know, oak trees. The idea that picking maple syrup is there's a lot of factors in it. You have to have a tree that is like 20 years old to produce. Okay, so you can't just like, here, we're going to take a bunch of seeds and go make our own. You have to have very specific weather conditions. You have to have people who know how to tap, other people who have to know how to distill. It's a very distributed system with lots of people required, lots of non-robots, so to speak, to be able to make maple syrup. So the author picked a really creative, interesting resource that the aliens could not easily reproduce, duplicate, or otherwise get a handle on, right? It was a good choice, and I thought it was very creative. And in fact, the creativity of the author, I mean, he seems like he's a very brilliant guy to be able to come up with a bunch of these things. You could tell he's been thinking about Death Stars and stuff since he was a child. So it's fun. So humanity being an underdog, I did like that too. The entire book, you can tell if there was a hierarchy in the galaxy, humanity is at the bottom rung to start with. Like, they are way behind in everything at the beginning. And so, and at the end, you feel like maybe they've gone up a little bit, but they're nowhere near competing with basically anybody. They're like barely scratching the surface of everything that's out there. But you see that hope that they have a chance. So I like that too. Okay, so there are a couple of things I didn't like about the book. It does not overshadow the things that I liked, but they're there. I want to talk about them. First is, this is definitely a plot-driven book. It is not about the characters or relationships. You have a bunch of characters, but you really don't get to know them beyond their use, their function. And Tyler, our main character, even him, he is the main character throughout the whole book, but you still don't feel like afterwards that you really know him as a person or that you really care about him as a person. You could give some big overall ideas, but it's not about him, it's about the ideas, it's about the plot. So I like good characters, and I like good relationships in characters, and this book doesn't have that. So just be aware, this is a plot-driven, not a people-driven type of book. Okay, so the science in here is amazing, but there is a lot of it, and a lot of it is technobabble / pseudoscience. And I'll give you an example of one that, just a paragraph, that is, it's not pseudoscience in that it doesn't mean anything, but this is kind of gives you an example of what a lot of the paragraphs are and how technical some of it is. So this is on page 163, and Connie, by the way, is going to be an asteroid. Okay, I got a hit on Connie right away. Connie? Steve asked. 6178-1986 Nathan replied. They were at about 40,000 feet, and he was reveling in the view. 2.1 kilometer nickel iron asteroid, Apollo. The last meaning is that its orbit was mostly outside of Earth's, but crossed it. They also generally stayed inside the asteroid belt, ranging from outside the orbit of Mars to inside the orbit of Earth. Aten asteroids were mostly inside Earth's, but entered Earth's orbit or crossed it. Aphoheli were those that stayed mostly in Earth's orbit. None of the classifications were precise. There were Aten asteroids that crossed orbits of Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Okay, so you just got an education in information about asteroid orbits that doesn't become relevant at all. But it gave it to you. I mean, part of this book is a lot of that kind of thing. You'll have a whole paragraph talking about the, temperature differences in, melting points and whether it would stretch it or buckle it or dent it or not be enough or explode it or whatever it may be as you're shining your mirror light on an asteroid to melt it for mining, right? And it talks about things like that a lot. You get a lot of detail on how they're going to do a specific thing, how they're going to build, how they're going to maneuver, how they're going to set apart, whatever. And it can get a little dragging. So the first 115 pages have to do with the maple syrup thing that I told you about. The next 150 pages, or whatever it is, has to do with setting up the mirrors. And this is a slow section of the book, I feel like. You could have some interesting bits, but it's a lot of like what I just read to you. That was in that section, where you're like, here is a chunk of science or pseudoscience talk, and here's a chunk of techno or technobabble nonsense or not talk, and you can get kind of dragged down to that. So this was the part when I had mentioned last week when I was saying what book I had picked out. My husband loved this book and my father was kind of just okay about it. Well, that was the part, the second section, that was the technobabble, that he basically started and he stopped reading. He didn't even get to the end, as far as I know, because it was too much. It dragged it down. And honestly, if it had stayed that way through the rest of the book, I probably would have said the same thing. But it does pick up. So it kind of does really interesting at the beginning, dips to too much technobabble, and then gets back up to being interesting again at the last third of the book. So I didn't really like how slow it was in the middle there. Okay. One other point I should make about the things that this one isn't a negative, but it may be the longer it goes. So it's already 2025 at the time that I'm recording this. This book was written 15 years ago and probably, it was published 15 years ago. So it was written at least a year before that. And already some of the references can be dated. Not too bad. But somebody, 20 years from now may have more trouble, and the longer you go, the harder it'll be. For example, as they're going somewhere, one of them turns to the other and says, "Hey, you got your BlackBerry on you?" And the guy says, "No, I left it in the truck." Okay, now I totally know what that means. And probably the people watching this know what this means. But there's probably a whole bunch of 20-year-olds that don't, And now granted, this is a science fiction book, and probably people who are interested in science fiction books like geeky technology stuff and maybe know the history of technology, and so could say what a BlackBerry is. But that's not all of the world, and it's not going to be all of the world forever, right? There's also a reference to transparent aluminum, which is clearly meant as a reference to Star Trek. But again, that's getting even, that's even a decade, 2 decades earlier than 2010. I mean, we're starting to get really up there as far as how far back something goes, and it's probably not in, again, that's probably one of those things that the average 20-year-old would go, transparent aluminum? What are they talking about? And having no clue that it was a reference to Star Trek. So little things like that it's got enough cultural references that may start drifting out of understanding. So yeah, that's just there. My final thing that I didn't love about the book is the level of destruction on Earth that seems to have no impact. Okay, so I will give a spoiler here. There is a lot of cities. Like just taking the US, we have LA and San Diego and Detroit and Philadelphia and New York and Washington, D.C., and a whole bunch more are wiped off the earth because of our invading aliens. So major, major, major destruction. According to this, and the U.S. is actually lightly hit in comparison to the other things that end up happening. They say that, like Africa and the, wilds of the Middle East and stuff like that are even worse, okay? So all this major disruption in humanity. But this book is kind of like, people have died, no big deal. Okay, I need to order a whole bunch more of this. And people are like, yes, we'll get right on that. It just seems like it has zero impact on Tyler's situation or the world situation. I mean, it really just, it's a number that the author throws out there, but it doesn't have any consequences. And because and part of it is understandable because the book is focused on outer space and aliens. It's not worried about, the end of the world, apocalypse, how it would just disrupt supply lines and how it would disrupt, how many people would die of famine if something like that actually happened, because of, all the shipping being completely destroyed and, things like that. It doesn't look at that at all. So it seems like, a whole bunch, it's like they just, snapped your fingers and the Earth's population dipped by 1/3 and they're like, we're fine. We just have fewer people. We'll just expand. It's just, it's a weird kind of way that the author handles that. So it's very much not a tragedy, I guess, because it doesn't handle like a tragedy. It's more like, it just happened. Those are numbers, statistics. It's not a big deal. We'll be fine. Overall, though, I loved the book. I really enjoyed it. It is an optimistic space opera. It is fun. You feel like, you're totally rooting for the underdogs and they just barely squeak by surviving and that's fun. Everybody likes that kind of thing. The book, like I said, is part of a trilogy and I would really like to read the next one. So my overall assessment is that it's going to go as part of my best of list. So it's part of my 1,000 books that everyone should read that are fun. So this will be one of them. I liked it. Big thumbs up. Okay, so part 2. My next book I picked was a children's book, The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. So I have read this several times. I read it as a child and loved it. I have read it to my kids and they loved it. Actually, my then 8-year-old, I think, asked for it again because we had read it like a year ago, a year before that, and he was like, what was that book that had, let's read that again, whatever that book was, and he was trying to describe it, and I'm like, oh, that one? He's like, yeah, that one. So I loved it, my kids loved it, so I'm going to review it next time, but spoilers, it's absolutely going to be on my list of best books that everyone should read. It just happens to be a kid's book this time. So, The Phantom Tollbooth. I hope you will enjoy seeing that recording next time, and thank you for watching.